Hey there, and welcome to the Church Collective Podcast, episode number 121. In this episode, we had the opportunity to talk to Kari Jobe again. If you missed our first interview with her, we have a link to it in the show notes over at thechurchcollective.com. And I also want to invite you, if you're not a part of our Facebook community, go look us up, the Church Collective Community on Facebook. A lot of times we'll pop in and we'll ask if you have questions for these artists as we get the opportunity to interview them. So we'd love for you to be a part of that conversation. Just some really cool questions came out, and this was just a really fun conversation. So here we go with the Church Collective Podcast, episode number 121.
So since my last project, I got married. We moved from Dallas and Arizona to Nashville, bought a house, sold that house, had a baby, changed churches. Cody signed with the record deal. Like, there's a million things going on. Never a dull moment. But just so amazing, because it's just really sweet to know that you're in the middle of God's will, and it could be a crazy journey, crazy ride, but there's a peace because we know we're doing what God's telling us to. So
sure,
it's been awesome.
That's cool. Could you speak to, you said too, you moved between churches. Like, could you talk about that a little bit? I know for our audience, a lot of them tend to be younger worship leaders from what we've seen, but I guess even just for worship leaders, we tend to, the general tenure for a worship leader doesn't tend to be very good. Not saying like there was any baggage with your move, but like, could you talk a little bit, like what does it feel like to change churches? Like, what did the Lord do in and through that with you?
Yeah. Well, I would imagine this with anybody. It's definitely a process, and there's a lot of navigating with it, but we just felt a shift and felt like the Lord was calling us to be here in Nashville at the Belonging, and to be here not just because of church, but because we felt called to come to Nashville. So we wanted to be a part of a local church here, and we are so excited the Belonging is here. And so to sit down with our current staff at the time at Gateway and just say, hey, here's what we feel like God is saying and what we're sensing from him. We presented it that way because we wanted to open it up for dialogue and conversation in case we were missing something or in case we were not hearing God correctly or something. So our spiritual leaders, who happen to be also our bosses, we just really were like, what do you feel? What do you hear? What do you sense? And they were all with us. They just said, yeah, we're behind you. We love you. We know that that's the right place and the right move for you guys.
Sure.
Their first question was, where will you go to church? Will you have a local church you will be able to be in, because we want you to be fed? And we were like, yes, we do.
Right.
It's the Belonging. We're excited. And so they were like, great, we're good then. They just want us to be sure to be being in community and being fed, not just working all the time. So it was really sweet. It's a very good transition.
Sure. Could you talk a little bit, like what does doing ministry look like now, with a little one?
Yeah, it's very different, and you might hear him yell out every couple of seconds. He's downstairs eating, and that's never a quiet situation. But it's changed a lot, but so fun. Just having to be a little bit more flexible with schedules, and we're about to go out on tour, and we have kind of an extensive schedule starting at 3:00 every day, and I'm like, well, there might be days that he comes in and he's with me while I'm teaching, or, maybe his nap time didn't work out the way we needed it to that day, or, we just kind of roll with the punches. And there's been times, we want to go to church, but he's been sick a couple times this last month, so we just had to stay home. And
sure.
I think more than anything, just having to have grace on myself that it's going to look different.
Right.
But that my first priority now is being a wife and a mom. And so the artist thing, doesn't always pan out the way I need it to, but it'll work out eventually. So
sure. What's the dynamic been like writing stuff with Cody?
Oh, great. It's been great. We wrote a little bit before we got married, so that's been easy. I know some couples are like, how do y'all write together and not kill each other? I'm like, well, we wrote a lot before we got married, so we had that friendship, aspect, and you have to be kind when you write with people.
Sure.
And so we just, we have a good scenario with writing together, and I love his perspective. I really trust his song sense. So there's a a mutual respect there, which helps as well.
Sure. So one of the questions that we got from our community was, how do you and Cody, as you're writing too, like how do you go about, I guess, vetting or working through the theology of your songs? Like how do you know?
Yeah.
Do you pick a theme and then kind of write around that? Do you write a melody first and then just maybe speak a little bit to your process?
Most of the time, it starts with a theme, like the garden.
Sure.
I knew I wanted to write something that had to do with this garden that was in my backyard that was giving me life, and just how God had gone before us, and how it just amazed me that He's been in the middle of our situation with my family. My sister lost a baby like right before she was about to give birth, and I was pregnant. So just all these dynamics in my mind, and God used this garden in my backyard to just speak life over me and help me realize that was what I needed right when I needed it. That God's always tending to the things of our hearts, and He's always pruning, and He's always going to be like a master gardener, and He knows what to prune, He knows what to plant, He knows what needs to be watered, and it looks like sometimes nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden life starts blooming, and you're like, whoa, God, you were working. And I forgot what your question was now. I just got off onto that detail.
Yeah, just basically, like, what's the songwriting process look for you? Like, how do you land on the themes of the songs you're doing? Yeah,
so that one was pretty poetic. So theologically, I always send my songs to my pastors and just say, hey, make sure there's nothing theologically incorrect of what we're saying. And so we always get them tested against scripture and just theologically sound stuff. So that way too, we're not having to be so mindful of that while we're writing. Sometimes you can get so caught up in things like that it kind of squelches your creativity.
Right.
So we just write, we tackle a theme, or we just write from the perspective we're wanting to write in, and then check it later. Sometimes we'll go in with when I wrote Forever, I had no idea what the theme was going to be. I just had a melody idea.
Okay.
So when I sat down to write that at the beginning with Brian Johnson, I was like, this is just kind of what I've been humming and what I've been singing. And he's like, wow, I've had this forever theme and just this little bit of this melody, and we put them together, and we were like, whoa, this feels like God, So I would just say all that to any songwriter. There's really never a full, formula, I think more than anything, you just have to jump in and go for it, no matter where you think you're starting from.
Right. What do you do to stay inspired, I guess? Like, how do you keep your creativity rolling in the midst of, all the regular life stuff? Like how do you kind of make sure that you're open and like able to do that kind of a thing?
Yeah. Well, for me, I always, just kind of the nature of how it works in my world, it's like I'm in a songwriting season. So not right now, I would say that I'm not in a songwriting season now, because I just released an album. So I kind of like take that hat off, and that I'm not trying to get inspired to write a song. I'm just kind of like, we're just kind of doing life right now. When I'm in a songwriting season, which I recommend people to do this, because God works in seasons in our lives. So it's kind of nice, unless that's all you do is you're a songwriter. But as an artist, as a mom, as a worship leader, serving church, I can't always have that hat on. It wears me out.
Right.
But to other people, like Mia Fields, one of my best friends, she writes songs almost every day. So that doesn't wear her out, But for me, it wears me out when I'm in a songwriting season, because everything is a potential inspiration for a song. So I constantly have my voice memo out on my phone, or a notepad close by that I'm writing these lyrical ideas or these themes down, because I'm just in that season. So in that season, quote unquote, could be like this last year was a whole season of it. So it was a year long. Where everything, I just was in tune, like, God, is this a song? Is this something? Is this something? Is this something? Where right now I kind of turned that off, because I don't need to do that for a couple more months,
Sure.
So unless we're going to write for church, but with that, I just would probably tune in for a couple days before I go into a session, and just so I'm not like, it's just how I'm wired, but other people are wired different. So you just have to do what works for you.
Sure. Well, I came across a video. It was you inviting people to come to like worship training sessions while you're on tour here.
Yeah.
And that just, I mean, obviously that would resonate a ton with our, audience.
Yeah.
You want to speak a little bit towards what would a worship leader get, coming to that? Should they bring their team,
Yeah, for sure. Because we loved local church, and that's where we came out of, that's where we do most of what we do outside of tours. I just know the importance of just speaking life over other teams, and just kind of getting in a circle, in essence, just kind of feel like everyone's together and just saying, hey, these are some things we're dealing with. What would you do? Or what have y'all done here? Or what's your experience with this? And just kind of talk about that kind of stuff, just to pour life and just to encourage. And
sure.
We're going to teach a little bit, and then whoever the opener is for that city, so if it's the Torwalds or Leland or the Helsers, depending on where we are, they will teach as well. And then all of us will sit on a panel and we'll do a Q&A.
Nice.
Yeah.
What,
be fun.
Like speaking to that training thing, like maybe thinking back when you were getting into worship leadership to now the conversations you may be having with people that are getting into it now, do you feel, is there something different now? Do you feel like what maybe are the challenges today that weren't necessarily a challenge then?
That is a good question. I think I used to get questions a lot about girls, like I'm a girl and I don't feel like there's a place for me, but now I feel like there's a overabundance of girls that are leading, which is beautiful, which tells me that, we pioneered that. God broke down some walls and fears or whatever it was that we were dealing with church at the time. But I think now it might just be the thing about being original. I think a lot of times, and I do this too, I want to sing the songs that are working already, like What a Beautiful Name, or something else that's not my song, Holy Spirit or something. But knowing your congregation and knowing what they need to sing, I think can be one of the biggest challenges. And what your pastor, this is a big one. Sometimes our pastors want us to lead songs that aren't our favorites.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we need to serve what our pastors are needing to facilitate whatever they're preaching on or whatever they're feeling for their they're their church, because they're the shepherd. So, just all those dynamics of surrendering our own agendas and our own desires and serving what needs to happen for that weekend. Yeah.
Could you just maybe you hit on the idea of like everybody feels like maybe they got to try to be original, or they might fall into the rut of just, grabbing all of the backing tracks they can for everything and just executing exactly like someone else. Could you maybe talk about that tension? Which side should you be on? Is it a little bit of both, back and forth on the weekends? Like what should that look like?
When you asked me that, my first thought was, I think a lot of times worship teams, we resort to doing what's comfortable because of the lack of time to rehearse, because most of the time we're coming together just for a weekend. Yeah. We've got like an hour before we have to be off stage for the service to start or something. My recommendation is always at least once every 2 months or once a month if you can, whatever works for your team. Have rehearsals on a night that you just have a couple hours to go through songs. That way you could workshop if you want to be original and be creative with your with that version or whatever. You have time, and it's not stressing the team out because there's barely any time to work on it. Yeah. So we call them workshops. I have them with my team, and we just get together for us. We have to get together for a couple days, but just a workshop, just to go through and be original and have the space to create. I think that could help teams, to not have to just resort to using multi-tracks every time just the exact way that it's been recorded.
Sure. So to maybe get a little more nitty gritty with that, like what do you do if your team is bigger than just like a single band? Like you got advice for like how do you bring 20 people in? You got 15 guitarists or whatever in there. Any like practical advice for that maybe?
Yeah, I would just say have at least a few of your musicians that you guys can have workshop things and then record them as if you were recording for a weekend, and then have the other team have the rest of your team learn it from that recording.
Sure.
And come prepared. I think most teams probably do this, but I mean, my guys, it's like rehearsal is at home actually.
Sure.
Really, when we're together, it's a run through. I don't have time for you to like listen to Planning Center and learn the song on stage.
Yeah, that's
it's
great.
like got to come prepared.
Sure.
So
Any advice for that too? I guess, how do you make sure your team, somebody's probably hearing that like, man, my team completely shows up and doesn't know what they're playing when they show up. How do you encourage your team to take that to the next level?
Yeah, you might just have to change the culture. You might have to have a big team meeting. And I think one of the things that worship leaders worry about is, I don't want to take any more of their time. They're already sacrificing so much. Most teams aren't being paid. It's like already volunteer time.
Right.
But everybody desires excellence and some kind of boundaries of excellence, So I think unapologetically just say, hey, we're going to change some culture. And so I need you. There's always more that has to happen up front, and then you can work from that system. So if you have to put in a little more time once a month, but then the services go much better and there's more flow and there's time for prophetic and there's just more space and more excellence, I think everybody would be on board with that.
Sure. Very cool. Last question. Our community tends to, whenever we get the opportunity, just ask, how can we come alongside and pray for you guys in this season?
Man, thank you. I think for us, just we're about to gear up to go on tour. We'll be gone about 6 weeks, and so just being away from home and being away from our community, you know, and then life on the road, just protection and all that kind of fun stuff.
Sure.
That'd be great if everybody would be praying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it for this episode. As always, if you could head over to thechurchcollective.com, hit that contact button if you're not connected with us. We would love to connect with you and connect you with others. God bless you today.